The movie begins with Adam Clay, a beekeeper, removing a nest of hornets from a barn, which has been destroying his hives, and a bother to his landlady. His landlady, Eloise Parker, is delighted that the hornet situation has been resolved and asks Clay to join her for dinner later. Clay is devoted to Mrs. Parker, who he says is the only person who has ever taken care of him. Subsequently, Clay uses a tube light and a taser gun to dispose of the hornets. While he harvests honey, Mrs. Parker is on her laptop when a malware alert beeps on her computer. A pop-up message instructs her to call the service provider, whose number is provided. Mickey Garnett is on the other end of the phone with a group of hackers in a neon-lit boiler room. He assures her that he can walk her through the steps of reinstalling the software that is acting up. Unwittingly, Mrs. Parker grants Mickey remote access to her computer. Through an elaborate phishing scam, the other hackers cheer Mickey on as they rummage through Mrs. Parker's accounts to ascertain her worth. Mrs. Parker is a retired teacher and now a charity director for children. For the inconvenience, Mickey claims to have credited back the subscription fee, but mistakenly sent more than he should. He begs Mrs. Parker to return the surplus, as he could lose his job. When prompted to put in her login credentials to the charity's bank account, and as soon as she keys in her password, all the money in her accounts is emptied, including the $2 million in the charity's account. Astounded, Mrs. Parker realizes that she just got clickjacked. Clay prepares a jar of honey for Mrs. Parker and heads to her house for the prearranged dinner. He finds the door unlocked and is tipped off by the beeping fire alarm. After turning it off, he grabs a knife and checks around the house. He is suddenly ambushed by Verona Parker, Mrs. Parker's daughter, and an agent with the FBI. As she arrests him for intruding, they both notice Mrs. Parker's body, who seems to have shot herself. When the police arrive at the scene, Verona disputes the suicide claims, noting that her mother was happy. She points fingers at Clay. Before Clay is taken in, he says he was only in the house because Mrs. Parker had invited him for dinner. He further states that he is a tenant who only let himself in because the door was ajar and Mrs. Parker's car was in the driveway. Later that evening, Verona checks out Clay's hives before stumbling upon her mother's laptop, where she discovers that all her bank accounts have been emptied. The following morning, Clay is released after his hands test negative for gun residue, and the police conclude that it was a suicide. Verona apologizes to Clay and has him over for coffee. Verona explains to him that her mother was scammed by a crew from United Data Group that has been operating for 2 years, according to the Cybercrimes Unit. She also says that it would be difficult to get justice in a court of law, since the defense might just argue that the elderly woman decided to donate the money to a stranger. Clay is triggered by it, noting that stealing from the elderly is erroneous yet easy to get away with, since they usually have no one to defend them. From one of his hives, Clay gets a phone, which he uses to call a mysterious group from his past. He asks for help getting the hackers' names and location. After getting the details, he drives to the area, armed with 2 gasoline canisters. 2 security get in his way, but he easily brawls them. At the front desk, he orders the receptionist to evacuate employees from other companies inside the building, as there will be a fire. Clay bulges into the illegal call center and commands one hacker to hang up the phone before squeezing his nose. He asks the other hackers to reiterate his words that they will never steal from the vulnerable again, but they laugh it off. Clay attacks one of the hackers, leading the hackers to take him seriously and repeat after him. He starts pouring gasoline on the computers when Mickey storms in with 2 security guards and orders him to stop. Clay fights off the men quickly, then sets up an improvised explosive device, which is set to go off when the phone rings. Mickey flees and Clay leaves the scene in his old truck as the building goes up in flames. Mickey calls Derek Danforth his boss. Derek is the CEO of Danforth Enterprises, the corporate parent of United Data Group. When Mickey informs him about the attack and the fire, Derek reaches out to Wallace Westwile, the head of security operations at Danforth Enterprises and former CIA director. Wallace distances himself from business outside Danforth Enterprises and refuses to help him. Derek calls back and asks Mickey to go through all recent phishing scam victims and find out who might be capable of vengeance. Once found, he orders Mickey to pick his best men and kill him. Verona gets a call from her partner, Matt Wiley, who informs him about the fire at United Data Group. Since the security camera went down after the fire, there is not much to go around at the scene, and witnesses are not talking. Mickey and his goons chase possible leads when they see Clay's truck, the same one at United Data Group. They shoot at his beehives in retaliation and follow him to the barn. Clay gets ready in anticipation and takes them out one after the other. After skillfully using combat styles to incapacitate all men, he cuts Mickey's fingers off using a bandsaw and leaves. While Verona is still questioning witnesses at the United Data Group building, things get heated, and Matt intervenes. He then notifies her that her mother's house is on fire. At the scene, they find a United Data Group card from one of the dead men and figure out that the beekeeper is somehow connected to both fires. Mickey calls Derek to inform him about the failed task, and just before he can tell him how dangerous the beekeeper is, Clay drags him out of his car. After tying him up with a seatbelt, he attaches him to his truck and sends the car off a bridge. Derek hears everything through the phone. Though terrified, Derek tells Clay he has no idea who he is messing with. Unbothered by this, Clay drives off in Mickey's car. Derek explains to Wallace about this mysterious man who has been attacking his outfit. He says the only known details about him are that he is a beekeeper. Wallace tells him he should be scared because if a beekeeper is looking for him, he will find him. Despite his vast experience with intelligence agencies and law enforcement, Wallace seems terrified at what will happen. At the Boston FBI field office, Verona unravels that United Data Group is one of several call centers, and a head office must connect them all. Matt acknowledges that finding Garnett will help put some pieces of the puzzle together. Matt then tells her that Clay appears to be a ghost, and his only records are a birth certificate and a social security number. They both find it suspicious and agree that he might be a former military member in a classified government program. A call then comes in, informing them that Mickey Garnett's body has been found. They find him dead in the ocean with his right-hand fingers missing. Wallace receives a call from Jessica Danforth, Derek's mother and the President of the United States. She asks Wallace to handle Derek's situation and even promises him a board seat at the holding company. Wallace declines, but promises to take care of Derek. Wallace immediately calls Janet Howard, the director of the CIA. He informs her that a beekeeper is looking for his client, Derek Danforth, and she takes this information seriously. Janet calls Wallace later and informs him that the man he is looking for is Adam Clay, a former beekeeper. She also assures him that the current beekeeper has been sent to take care of Clay, but Wallace is horrified, noting that the current beekeeper is a lunatic who might cause them more problems. The active beekeeper, Anisette Landress, attacks Clay at a gas station, portraying her dangerous and unhinged stunts. Armed with a minigun and an outrageous attitude, Anisette shoots at a police car before firing aimlessly around the gas station, hoping to smoke out Clay. Clay tactically maneuvers behind her, and a hand-to-hand confrontation ensues. Clay gets a jar of honey, throws it at her, and lights her up. He cuts off her index finger and then drives off with a car belonging to one of the witnesses. Director Howard then informs Wallace that the beekeepers have decided to stay away from Clay's situation since the first attempt to eliminate him had failed. The following day, Verona and Matt go to the gas station, where they also get clues that Anisette might be in the same beekeeping organization. Like Clay, she is a ghost with no official government records. She also used military-grade weapons and has a book on beekeeping for beekeepers. Verona tries to wrap her head around everything and points out that Clay is headed to Boston. Wallace meets top-tier operators led by Pettis, drawn from the SEAL team and the Delta Group, to stop Clay. He briefs them about the beekeepers. He says it is an out-of-command government program that keeps the nation safe and regards it as the hive. Like worker bees, they believe that if one system of the complex system of workers is compromised, the hive will collapse. A beekeeper's mission is to keep the hive safe, and they do so quietly, on their own judgment. Beekeepers work until they die. No one can tell them to stand down. Wallace further says that a retired bee has now gone rogue, and he must be stopped. He, however, warns them that he is dangerous. And despite the team comprising the best military men, they are still nothing compared to him. Verona reads an excerpt from the beekeeping book, which says that some bees can be queen slayers that kill the queen if she produces an unfit male offspring. She is interrupted by a call where they are both asked to meet the deputy director of the FBI. Meanwhile, Clay uses Anisette's index finger to access the beekeeper's facilities. He extracts some information and a location from the computers and grabs some supplies before driving off in one of their trucks. Verona briefs Deputy Director Jackson Prigg and Special Counsel Amanda Munoz about the crimes connected to the Beekeeper. When she mentions the special program about beekeepers, the Deputy Director is apprehensive and orders her to move on. Verona anticipates Clay's next target might be 9-Star United in Boston, another call center mothered by Danforth Enterprises. 9-Star United is housed in another neon-lit boiler room, and Rico Anzalone is its manager. He and a group of hackers are carrying out their routine phishing scams. The SWAT team sent by the FBI gets ready to take over the building when Pettis and his men stop them, saying that they were there on the governor's orders. The SWAT team leaves to set a perimeter outside. Pettis orders Rico to shut down his operation and leave the premises. But Rico stays put. While Rico calls Derek, his boss, the SWAT team outside, is planning on how to cover all entry points. Clay joins them and casually says that there is no back door for him to use. He introduces himself as the man they are looking for. Before they can detain him, Clay incredibly takes on the SWAT team with his bare hands and uses their guns at some point to incapacitate them. He then uses one officer as a human shield and infiltrates the building. Pettis tells Derek that Wallace hired him to ensure the safety of 9-Star United, but Derek tells him to stay out of his business and go look for the Beekeeper. As Pettis and his men leave, the hackers mock them, not knowing that Clay is among them. Clay attacks one of the hackers and Pettis returns, ordering him to stand down. Clay notes that none of the people in the room are innocent, and they deserve what's coming to them. A shootout ensues and Clay is forced to run outside, where he tactfully eliminates Pettis' crew in the hallway while hiding in the ceiling. After turning on the fire alarm, Clay faces off with Pettis and kills him with a fire extinguisher. Verona arrives at the scene and enters the building with another SWAT team to chase after Clay. Clay sets the SWAT team up in a rigged elevator. While they shoot at him, he sets it off, killing and injuring most of the men when the elevator crashes. Clay then tortures and interrogates Rico while clipping staples to his face. Verona and another SWAT team are closing in, and Clay is showing Rico a photo of Mrs. Parker while still torturing him for answers on where the money goes. Rico finally shows him a group photo with Derek in it, noting that he is untouchable. Clay says no one is untouchable, noting that the queen must be replaced if the hive is out of balance. Verona closes in on Clay, who tells her that Rico is responsible for her mother's death. Verona says there are laws for that, but he says he has to come in when the law fails. As he exits, Clay finds Matt, disarms him, and lets him live without hurting him. In the aftermath, Verona also sees the group photo of Rico and the president's son, Derek. After finding out that Pettis and his men did not get Clay, Wallace advises Derek to contact his mother, noting that Clay cannot attack him if he is near the President of the United States. The president agrees, tells him to meet her at the beach house, and then carries on with her presidential duties. Verona tells Matt that he understands why Clay is fighting the hackers, but he must follow the law. In a meeting with the deputy director, Verona implicates Danforth Enterprises with the data mining software all the call centers use to hunt their prey. She further says the president used these illegal proceedings to self-finance her campaign. She also points out that Clay considers himself a queenslayer, a bee that must kill the queen if he produces defective offspring. This means that Clay's next victim is the president. Verona and Matt head to Danforth Estate, where security has been beefed up. Wallace is in a room with Derek and a mercenary, Lazarus. Lazarus notes that beekeepers are extremely dangerous, and though he killed one previously, he unfortunately lost his leg. The president then arrives, while security personnel continue to man every entry. Clay emerges from a tunnel and hangs under a truck. While a Secret Service officer checks under the car, Clay attacks him and takes his place, gaining entry to the heavily guarded event. The president says hello to her son while Lazarus's team arrives. After leaving detonators under one of the vehicles, Clay removes his Secret Service disguise uniform and is left with a suit. He joins the party and blends in. The deputy director questions Derek about his fraudulent data mining using Danforth Enterprises, which shocks the president. Meanwhile, Clay has been made and is about to be executed by Lazarus when he blows up the car and distracts them. He runs back to the building amidst the chaos, incapacitating anyone in his way. Meanwhile, Derek confesses to having corrupted the CIA software to hunt money instead of terrorists, which helped his mother win the election. Clay is still making his way to the president, and Jessica says she will tell Clay and the entire nation about his son's involvement in fraud. Clay has to face off against Lazarus before he can reach the president. Lazarus puts on an impressive fight, but is eventually outpowered. Wallace tries to talk him out, but Clay blows off the door. With the president hell-bent on exposing her son, Derek shoots Deputy Director Jackson. Clay then makes his way in, and Derek holds a gun to his mother. Verona and Matt then bulge in and order Clay to drop his weapon. Clay tells Verona that he works for justice, not the law. Derek is about to shoot the president when Clay blows his head off. Clay dives outside through the window, and although Verona has a clear shot, she lets him walk. The movie ends with Clay digging out his getaway bag, wearing his scuba gear and rebreather, and diving away.